Welcome back to this week's episode of the Buck 92.3 Sports Show. Austin Shattuck, your sports director, joined alongside me is always Jeremy Wood, JW in the Morning. And this week's guest, Louie Vito, the oldest Olympic half-pipe snowboarder. Let's get started, Louie. So you're fresh off competing in the 2026 Olympics a month ago. As the oldest Olympic half-pipe snowboarder now of all time, what was the preparation like leading into the Olympics?
You know, for me, it was just a lot of riding, but in the off season, making sure I stayed on my diet, stayed on my workouts, because that's kind of what has allowed me to be riding at this age and doing the things that I'm doing. And then as far as snowboarding goes, just, push myself and try to get everything you want to get done, but also, be smart, whether that's rehabbing and getting PT after, but also doing prehab and doing it before. So just kind of trying to stay on top of my body. I've had a lot of disc issues over the years. I have a bulged L3, L4, L5 disc. So those are the main things that give me issues nowadays. Other than that, I feel great. So it's just kind of making sure I'm managing that the best I can. And, then it's kind of out of my hands, just push myself as I can, as much as I can. And whatever happens with the body happens, but it's been a long career. So I have a lot of war stories, so to speak, with my injuries. So just trying to keep my body healthy, but also progressing.
You mentioned your diet. What does that usually consist of?
Oh man, I've definitely gotten a little more laxed, more so lately, but I don't really do milk. I don't do soy. I don't really eat a lot of carbs unless I'm snowboarding. Heavy fats, a lot of protein, eggs. I'd say chicken and salmon mostly, but I've added, more beef into my diet. But yeah, mostly just kind of trying to eat for what the workload is, whether that's in the gym or on the mountain, trying to make sure I'm eating to either supplement what I'm doing, but also replenish what I've burned and things like that.
Is that your diet kind of year round, or is that just for leading up to preparation for the Olympics?
I stay on everything pretty much year round, just because, when I started going to my trainer, I went to a guy named John Schaefer, who's one of the best trainers in the world. I met him through Apollo Ono. So I've been with him for 16 plus years, and really as I've grown, my body's adapted, my age and things like that. We've changed my programs for working out, and same with diet. So I've kind of always stayed on it because I went to him for 5.5 weeks out in Philly and it was death. So I was like, okay, well, I don't ever want to get too far out of shape, even if my schedule allows me to have some time to enjoy, because I don't want to die like that in the gym again. So I've always tried to stay on top of my workouts and on top of my diet, just because I didn't want to go through the pain, the pain of getting back into it.
You're obviously from Columbus, now in Utah, well, in Arizona right now, but when you were younger, what kind of sparked your interest in snowboarding?
Well, my grandparents are from Tiffin, Ohio, and obviously growing up in Bellefontaine, we're right next to Mad River Mountain. So my grandparents thought it'd always be great for all the cousins to get into skiing, because, it's a great activity for the family to do, and the extended family to do together in the wintertime. So we started skiing, and I'm on the younger side, I would say, of my cousins. And so we started skiing. My dad and I saw snowboarding one time, fell in love with it. And my dad's got, whatever he's interested in, he's all in on. So I was lucky because he really fell in love with snowboarding, and I did too, but I just had fun. He said he had a passion for it, and I didn't even know what that meant, when I was a little kid. And so we started snowboarding more, and we started traveling a little bit more for it. Then my sister started snowboarding, my mom started snowboarding. Then it was like a whole family affair. So it was just one of those things that just looked cool. And growing up next to Mad River was easy access to go riding there. And, for me, I didn't know any better. I was just stoked to go snowboarding. Then we started traveling around the Midwest and just to ride different resorts. And then it became a thing that my dad and I especially did together, because my sister was very active in other sports. So she was busy with that too. So it was kind of like, or my parents were always on the move with my sister or myself, but my dad was always ready to go snowboarding.
For half-pipe snowboarding, there obviously are a ton of aerial tricks. I got to ask this question. What has maybe been the hardest trick to learn?
Oh, man. Well, it's different for me than for other people. You have certain kids that are good at spinning a certain direction. Some are better at flat spinning. Some people are better at flipping. Now, for me, it was different than right now, because our access to an airbag was limited. We didn't even have an airbag in the beginning. So, I'd say 5 or more double corks that I've learned have all just been, I say, do or die on snow. I do a single, I do the sign of the cross, take a deep breath, throw it a little harder, and hope for the best kind of thing. Nowadays, you have airbags that you can land on, kind of like what stuntmen use for movies, but a little more made for snowboarding and for what we're doing. And now they even have in Japan, it opened last summer, they have it's called dry slope. So it's kind of plastic bristles that you can ride on. And then you go into an airbag. So now you can do it year round without any snow. Back to your question though, for me, I would say my back double cork 12 was my hardest one I learned because I used to do it a different way. And I didn't like the way that I did it, but it was really scary. So when I got hurt, I had a broken back and blown discs and my cortisone wore off. And so I had to call it that year. And that was the last time I did it. Then I was like, okay, I need to work on this. But I never did it because it was scary to do it on snow and just to not have to do it for a competition. So it took me a while to break some habits and to fix it the way that, and to have the access that I wanted to do. So I would say that one was the hardest to break the habits to learn it a new way, even though I already technically could do the trick. And then I had another trick that was a switch, more or less a switch double backflip. And you're going over essentially your switch tail in the pipe. So you're spinning into the pipe while traveling down. A lot of people do it where they're flipping down the pipe, kind of more like a standing backflip on a half pipe wall. That one I landed quickly, but after I learned it, to be able to do it consistently and the amplitude I wanted to was hard for me. And that's why I never really did it in competition. So it's kind of a twofold. One was harder for me to get the right access. The other one was just a consistency thing of landing it.
When you learned these different, I guess, tricks, how did you go about doing that? Was there like YouTube videos that you watched, or did you just go by trial and error?
A lot of it was trial and error because some of them I was the first one to do like frontside double cork 1080 in competition. I was the first one to do that. And again, at the time, it was just do or die on snow. We didn't have, all these kids doing it into the airbag and learning it. This is at the forefront of that. Now there's a trick called the double Michael Chuck, which is named after Mike Michael Chuck. And seeing him do it, you have an idea. But in snowboarding, there's not technically a right or a wrong. So like when I used to do double Michael Chucks, my access was different than how he actually did it. And he would do it in, he did it in small pipes before this evolution of a 22-foot half pipe. So that also changes a little bit the trick. But yeah, I was that's where my age comes in. I was before you could really watch it on YouTube, or you had a group of kids learning it at a young age and everyone just kind of learning the same trick. This was, there was only a couple of us really pushing it to that level at the time.
Well, and that's Louie, it's Jeremy, and just watching you over all these years, ever after I worked with your dad back in 2004, following you along and just been following you along all these years, the camaraderie that you guys have, like you and Sean White and Dingo and all those guys that you guys rode with, how did you guys did you guys talk to each other about, hey, let's try this trick, or hey, because I know it's like a family when you guys are all together.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people that you're a little more in depth with when you're talking, and some people that are a little bit more secretive or somewhat competitive. I remember my dad always saying, like, you're always telling people how to do these tricks, but you're competing against them. And my theory was, yeah, but they're the people that push me. Mm-hmm. So, and if they're asking me how to do a trick, I can already do that trick. So I'm already ahead of them, and they still have to do it better than me. And that pushes me to do it better because now they have it. So there was certain people that I had that relationship with, like Scotty Lego, but we also rode very differently. Even like the tricks we had that were the same, they were completely different. Greg Bretz is probably someone that I really leaned on. He was he's younger than me, but we traveled together so much, and we were the type of friends that could like look at each other and know that person's mood. Like, okay, I need to all right, let's do this, man. Let's get this going. But I would say you kind of have your friends you lean on that, like, you got this, let's go, and you trust them with that. Then you have the friends that you're friends with, but you're not really talking shop with them on the mountain. So it was different in that sense. And then, also if you have different riding styles, like I said earlier, you have the people that are more flat spinners, the people that are technical, the people that go big. It was kind of a little bit more separated, I would say, a bit at that time. But Greg Bretz and Lego, I traveled with pretty much the whole year for many years. So those are the guys that I would say I had a lot of trust in. But Greg Bretz definitely takes the cake for as far as new tricks. And we were both on a lot of the same sponsors. So that also played a part, how much we were together.
Being a brother from another mother, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. He was my little brother that was like 6 foot tall.
Louie, let's get back to the questions here. How do you apply to be a part of the X Games or the Olympics and all the competitions that you've competed in?
Well, a lot of it is, your resume, what you've done. So X Games has changed over the years. I qualified for that through another event that the guy who runs X Games, the selection committee, was running this event. So I won that, and that's how I got my first invite to X Games. And then how you do an X Games a lot of times carries over to the next year. Olympics, you have a qualifying via points and national team criteria. And then it was back when I started, it was kind of, how you did at USASA and some regional events. Now there's a lot more feeder systems. You have the Rookie World Tour, you have Rev Tours, NORAMs, Europa Cups. You have a bunch of different things that can get you into the World Cup. But a lot of times it depends on like the national team, the rookie teams for the national teams. Because for Olympics, you have to do these events called FIS contest, World Cups. And the way to get into that is you have to have a nation spot, and the nations can only have so many spots depending on where the competition is. Back when we had do tours, same thing. A lot of it was invite. Every once in a while you had events where you had a qualifying heat, so to speak. You might have pre-qualified, like a normal tournament. Think like March Madness in the sense, you make the tournament, and then as you do better in each round, you can get higher. And then once you kind of make it to the semifinals or the finals, you have a good showing. You have a better chance of skipping those early rounds for the next year. So a lot of it just was how you did in previous events. And then if you go way back further, earlier in my career, sometimes you got in through just kind of word of mouth, like, oh, this person's been killing it, you give them a shot kind of thing. But that was very early on in my career.
So it's not really about what you know, it's about who you know to kind of get into these events, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, it's also you gotta perform. You gotta prove that you deserve to be there. They're not just letting you in because you have a big following, and you still gotta be able to have the tricks and be competitive for the most part.
When did you kind of realize snowboarding was your passion?
I think when I was young, I really loved it. It was all I wanted to do. But then I'd say for like when I learned that it was like a feasible option to do is I went to boarding school, I went to Stratton Mountain School, and that was a big thing because it was the first time I got to snowboard for a full season. Being in Ohio, our winters can be very short, except for this winter. It's a little crazier this winter, but winters are short. I had a real coach. I had great schooling that allowed me to travel, because that was always the thing. If I played baseball, football, schools in Ohio are a little more understanding than snowboarding at the time. So I was able to travel. And then I went to 2002 Olympics with a friend of mine that I was going to school with. He invited my dad and myself to go to the Olympics with he and his dad. And I got to watch the Olympics. And in 2002, we swept the half pipe podium, which I was there. Ross Powers won. And I was like, oh, wow, Ross Powers won the Olympics. He went to Stratton Mountain School. That's where I'm going. He was coached by the guy that's coaching me at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I went to nationals that year and won my age group, which I've never done prior. And so I'd say that was the time where I was like, wow, like I could, actually do this. Like this is like a real thing I could do.
Make a career out of it.
Exactly. And I was, 12, maybe almost 13 at the time.
That's one thing I couldn't remember. I knew you were younger when you went out to Stratton, but I couldn't remember how young you were.
Yeah, I went winter of 8th grade and then all through high school.
So you talk about you as a younger kid, and I did a little digging or research on you. I see that you kind of hold a fundraiser for younger kids. Can you explain a little bit about that and what goes into that fundraiser?
Yeah, so I've always done a charity event. I did it for 15, 16, 17 years at Mad River Mountain, and that was canned food or paper product to enter because, most of these, pretty much all these competitions, it costs money to enter. And for me, it was important to get everybody involved as much as I could. Plus, it was right after Christmas. So all the canned food and paper products were donated to St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry, which, right after the holidays are pretty bone dry. So we pretty much restocked them for the full year. And then all my sponsors pitched in on prizes. So everybody that entered got at least something. And then the grand prize winner got a grand prize from the raffle. They got a free trip to Wendell's snowboard camp, which is a snowboard camp in the summer in Mount Hood, Oregon. I paid for the travel. Wendell's gave us the session and they got to go to snowboard camp in the summer. The charity event hasn't happened since COVID. COVID obviously being crazy times. And then now Mad River's under new ownership, which changed the dynamic a little bit. But my dad and I still talk about trying to bring it back. It's just figuring out the best way to do that, how we're going to do it. And then my schedule has just been so crazy that it's been a little more difficult since COVID, just with my event schedule. So hopefully the future it'll come back because it was my way of giving back to the community that helped raise me, helped make the snowboarder that I am. them, but also do it where it's not going to cost people an arm and a leg to enter an event. Like a lot of these snowboard events are pretty expensive to do.
So not only are you a good snowboarder as well, but I was reading online that you were part of season 10 of Dancing with the Stars. How did this happen with Chelsea Hightower?
Yeah, so that was a crazy one because obviously I hadn't gone to the Olympics yet. So a friend of mine who's an agent asked if I wanted to do this interview. And I never watched the show. I think I saw like Floyd do a couple dances and Master P do a couple because I liked them. But my parents were into it. And I was like, okay, I'll go interview for it. And I didn't fit with that season. So I thought they'd wait to see if I'd make the Olympics in 2010. And then they hit me up about doing the fall season in 2009 and talked to a few sponsors, talked to a couple of snowboarders that are like mentors and, I have a lot of respect for. And then I was like, all right, well, I got the kind of the blessing from them. And then I thought, that's 22 million people watching that a week. If I could take less than 1% and introduce them to snowboarding, that's a big influx into our sport. So that was kind of my thought process going into it. And then once I was on, it was a whole new world. I mean, I always tell people I'm doing dances that I have no confidence in. I'm wearing clothes you wouldn't see me wear even on Halloween. 22 million people watching a week, live audience, judging, and it's like it's go time. There's no like take your time. You're just on no matter what. And so it was very interesting. It was very far out of my comfort zone, but it's something that I'm very thankful I got the opportunity for. It was just crazy the timing and the fact that they wanted me to do it before I even made it to the Olympics. So they took a gamble on me. So it was a great experience and a very eye-opening experience.
Is this something you would want to do again?
Yeah, I would definitely do it. I just, a lot of times they've had a couple where they've brought people back. It's mostly, I would say, people that have been finalists and things like that. So it's a little different, but I would love to do it. And now they're kind of making a big, heavy resurgence. So it's been really cool to see. So maybe if they ever give me the opportunity, maybe I'll be back. But we'll see. Right now, my main focus was always the Olympics. And now that I checked that off, got a little more time, I can figure something else out.
So speaking of the Olympics, obviously they're all wrapped up. So now what are your kind of plans for the future now that the Olympics are all done?
I'm just going to see where the end of the season, and, I lie with some sponsor stuff, but I'll always be a snowboarder, always snowboarding, but just no more contests. My body's pretty beat up and, I'll be 38 in a few days. And just one of those things where I think the next oldest was like 30 or 31 of I was competing against. So there's not too many people even that make it to their 30s, and I think it's a good way to kind of go out and do it on my terms the way I wanted to do it. And so we'll see what the future holds.
That's great to hear. Being a snowboarder in this area, what does it mean to kind of snowboard for your country in the Olympics and perform at a high level?
It means everything. It's kind of crazy because, our sport's an individual sport. It's definitely you didn't really know what to think when you're going into it. But like in Vancouver, for instance, like when you're about to come out and, your Team USA is chanting, USA, USA, it's like the most chilling goosebump feeling I've really had. And then obviously doing it for Italy towards the end was something that it was very proud moment for my family and myself, because that's why I did it. Was for my family's heritage, my grandmother who came from Italy. There's a lot more personal reasons. So to be able to do both was pretty surreal, and I'm definitely very fortunate to be in a position to be able to represent both countries. It's a crazy feeling, especially because you're so used to kind of being on your own, or you're competing and traveling with the same people, but it doesn't matter if they're from Japan, Switzerland, the U.S., wherever. I mean, it's just the flag next to their name, because you're still going to all the same camps, training with them, competing with them, doing everything with them. So it doesn't matter as much. Like, it's not like a team sport where you have practice with only your nation. So it was a different aspect, but it's something that you really feel at the Olympics, obviously, and it's a pretty surreal feeling.
You mentioned earlier in the show that you started snowboarding at a very young age. Why should maybe the future generation or younger kids consider not only snowboarding as a hobby, but also to maybe compete for trophies like you as well?
I think you got to have a passion for it first. I mean, because it's not if you get hurt, it's when you get hurt. You're always going to deal with injuries. And, with our sport, we're not like a basketball or a football where you can kind of sit out for little injuries here and there. Like, I've battled through. I've ridden with my back broken. Like I said, my discs blown almost all the way through, meniscus torn. I get an MRI for a lower back issue, and then they're like, oh, you have an old compression fracture that you just never know about. So you got to have a passion for it, because those things come, but it's just something that's fun. I mean, I never thought that snowboarding would open the doors that it's opened for me, take me around the world, introduce me to, friends that I'll have for life, and different cultures, different foods, and just really just seeing the world in a different light, all from riding my snowboard. Especially when I got into it, it was never really something it's why I did it. So I think whatever your passion is, go all in on it. And as they say, if you find your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. Find something that you love to do. But that's really in snowboarding. You got to love it, because there's going to be highs and lows and hospital visits and rehabs and all of that. But, for me, the pros by far outweigh the cons. And it was something that, I'm so thankful for.
Now that you are done competing, have you thought about maybe getting into coaching or maybe judging, or what kind of looks towards the future?
Coaching's been a big question. I've had people asking me this for probably since like 2017, about me getting into coaching. And right now where I'm at, it's not at the top of my list, because it's the same travel that I've just done minus the snowboarding part. So telling my wife, hey, do you want to come to Switzerland with me? And she'd be like, oh, to watch you coach? It's not as appealing as watching me snowboard.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I don't want it to come off, very snooty, but it's not like we're up in the mountains. So if you're not up on the mountain, you only need about 30 minutes and you can explore the whole village that you're staying in and see every restaurant, every shop. But I would be interested in doing, like, maybe right now it'd be like, oh, you want me to come out and help coach for a 2-week, 3-week camp? That's more interesting. Judging, who knows? But judging, I know, is a very hard job, and a job that is a thankless job, because you're always going to tick somebody off. It does, because our sport's subjective. So there's, sometimes you get scored really well, you can do the same run, and you might not get the score the next week. So it's a job that definitely, like I said, no one is ever happy with the results. But I'm not sure. I'd always like to stay in snowboarding somehow. Maybe do some commentating moving forward. I've already kind of done a grip of that, but to do that a little more consistently could be fun, because I know a lot about it. I've done it for a while, and I still really enjoy watching snowboarding and snowboarding in itself.
An inspiring snowboarder that has pretty much inspired a lot of the younger generation with his fundraisers, and he's competed in all kinds of X Games and the Olympics, and fresh off his Olympics performance here a couple of months ago. Louie Vito, thank you so much for coming on today's podcast. We really appreciate all the insight that you provided us.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on, and especially anything Ohio-based. I got so much love for Ohio. Like I said earlier, it made me the type of snowboarder I am, the type of person I am. So I'm really thankful you guys gave me the opportunity to come on.